Good afternoon. My name is Marie Newton, and I'd like to thank you for joining us for today's webinar. We will be answering your questions at the end of the presentation, so please hold your questions until then, at which time you can submit them by clicking on the Q&A icon. If you have further questions after the webinar has ended, please feel free to email them to me, and I will forward them to the appropriate person that can answer them. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be archived on CABE's website under Professional Development. And now I'd like to introduce Lisa Steimer, Deputy Executive Director for CABE.
Thanks so much, Marie. It's really a pleasure to have Don Harris and Martha Brackeen-Harris with us today for this webinar that's presented by CABE's DEIB committee. We are going to have a discussion about the book Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. And Dr. Martha Brackeen-Harris is CABE's DEIB consultant and has a very rich experience working in this area. And Donald Harris has a list of things here. He's a former Bloomfield board chair. He is one of CABE's past presidents. I believe number 46 is the number. And he is a current member of the Connecticut State Board of Education. So it really is my pleasure to introduce to you Don Harris and Martha Brackeen-Harris. I turn the program over to the two of you now. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Patrice. Thank Kay for inviting us and allowing us to do this, which I'm very passionate about having opportunities to do anything around these issues. So we're going to just say a little bit more about ourselves before we start and try to think about, why this is so important. So I guess I'll start. I've been in education that's been my entire career. And I've worked in public schools and independent schools. And so I have a rich background in both. But through it all, I've always been interested in how students are faring in their schools. The schools are very different and students have different needs. And I'm just so happy that I've been able to be a part of that and well-rounded. So we're talking about, our Black male population, basically. And I just want to say we have one son, and I'm from a mostly female family. And so I did not grow around and know a lot, but when I started teaching, I figured I needed to figure out this male schooling and how I can be, as a Black female teacher, I could be a great teacher for everybody. So I'm I will be talking from personal experience, but not with my own children, although we have four grandsons. But so I'm just going to put my 2 cents in. And I want you to remember these are our views, how we see it, our experiences, which are not the same for everybody, but we're just going to talk from our hearts today. Don?
Yeah, thank you, Patrice. Thank you, Lisa, Will Marie, for the invite. Uh, I don't have a lot of experience in webinars, but I kind of jumped at the opportunity to be a part of this because of the book and because of my life. I've spent my entire adult life in education, and although I'm now 81 years old, I'm still involved in education as a member of the state board. But I grew up in Hartford, moved to Bloomfield as a student and as a sophomore in high school. And so I've got a rich history living in Hartford, in the north end of Hartford, and living out in the sticks or the country of Bloomfield at the time in 1959. So, but again, thank you for the welcome, and we're going to just again try to give you our perspective on what this book has meant. Martha?
Okay. So I always start with rules of engagement or agreements, just things to think about as we go through our presentation. Remember that it's important to listen fully first. Don't, as soon as you hear the topic, try to listen. Don't like put your opinions up and and forget to listen to what we're saying about ours. We're going to have chances for questions at the end. So, and also it's important to listen to understand, not to, tell us what's wrong, things like that. And remember, we all can grow and change, even 81-year-olds. We're all lifetime learners. And attend to think about the tones of our words and what we're saying. We're trying to build and we're not trying to break. And let's all practice courteous goodwill, because some of the things we talk about, we're all different. You may disagree, and we respect that because we disagree with each other on some of the same issues. We think about things in different ways, but it's all, let's just practice goodwill and give each other grace. Okay, so Don.
Yeah. Again, we have been asked to read The Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. And I had to go on online to be sure I was pronouncing his name correctly. And his name is Emmanuel Acho, Acho, but it's pronounced Acho. And Emmanuel is a 34-year-old man, one of four children of a Nigerian born and bred parents. He was born and raised in Dallas, Texas. He played football for the Texas Longhorns, and after college was drafted by the Cleveland Browns of the National Football League. He played in the National Football League for 5 years with the Browns, the Philadelphia Eagles, and he retired in 2015. He also has a brother who played for, I believe, 9 or 10 years in the NFL. But he started a career in media, spending a lot of time in ESPN. But it was the murder of George Floyd that was the impetus for him to begin a digital series entitled Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man as a way to educate and inform on racism, systemic racism, and social injustice. He has since written books entitled The Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Boy, and in 2024, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Jew. Emmanuel is also a member of the Omega Psi Phi fraternity, which is a Black fraternity that many of our members join in college, and some join after college. But one of the tenets of our fraternity, of which I'm a member, by the way, When you first become a member or you're in the process of becoming a member, uh, you have to memorize a poem. And the poem is entitled If, and it was written by Rudyard Kipling. Now, he is an English poet, but he's got roots in India, and, uh, and it was such an appropriate poem uh, that I wanted to read it to you. So if you would indulge me, If by Rudyard Kipling. If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hatred, and yet don't look too good nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to, broken, and stoop and build them up with worn out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will, which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch, if neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And which is more, you'll be a man, my son. If by Rudyard Kipling. Martha?
Thank you, Don. I think it's so important when we talk to our young men that we give them something to have that they can pull out in their brain when they're dealing with a situation. And of course, we know about the statistics, and we know that we have to teach our young Black men how to be quiet when if they're stopped. And there are lots of rules, but there are some things that just come out of the blue. And so if we can let them have some words, then they can focus on that, and just maybe it will deflate whatever situation they get into. So just to have you stop a minute and think about your own experiences, and think about, have you ever personally witnessed an injustice against a Black man? And I'll just stop and let you think about that. And think about what it was. Think about what you did or didn't do, or how you found out about it. So, we know that things happen all the time, and just just thinking rather than citing all the words of things that the names of people we know and that we've heard on media, but talk about you individually. So throughout our discussion, we encourage you to take notes or jot down your thoughts throughout. And so we'll have a chance at the end. So our format is we hope we're going to sort of interview each other with a question and then starting question, and then we'll talk about um, how we feel about the topic. So topic one, Don, you can
Yeah,
ask a question.
yeah, yeah. Topic one, and actually this comes from chapter four, uh, which is cite your sources or on cultural appropriation. Let me ask you, Martha, what is cultural appropriation and why does it bother you?
Well, cultural appropriation to me is when you borrow or take something from someone else's culture and you use that for some kind of reason, whether it is to want to be like that person or just take it because you just say, oh, I can try, I want to try this too. I want to see how this feels. And which everybody has the right, to dress the way you want to do things. But the problem is so many times we get it wrong if we're not from that culture. And that you may think you're honoring them by acknowledging that they have a wonderful culture and you can do these things. But sometimes it doesn't land that well with the people when they see themselves, when they see something that is special to them being misused. And my whole problem is that too often it's made people do that to make money off of it or to be unique. And they're taking something that is yours and you feel that it's very important to you and somebody else is taking it and making money and then you're offended by that. So the other thing that's hard about it is normally if you're taking something, if you're um, in a majority or if you have the identity of people who have privilege, and we all have privilege in some kind of way. Um, but also, if you are in the majority of that, you have the privilege, then you have the power and you have the power over someone. And if it's someone else who does not have the power, has to just, swallow it and doesn't always get the opportunity to change it, or even if they bring it up or something, the person with the power has um, the power to ignore that or not. So it's just really hard. And for one thing, it trivializes a lot of the historical oppressions. Now, I have a story, and it's with my middle school students, and we would have March break, and children would get 2 weeks off. And of course, this was in an independent school. And of course, there were many who would take these wonderful vacations, especially to the islands or someplace warm for March break. And then there are some, my children included, who didn't go away. I was just trying to catch my breath and enjoy, 2 weeks of not working. And so we really didn't get a chance. They didn't get a chance to go places very often, although I would always do something special. But when we all came back, um, a lot of the young girls would have a braid, they would have like a cornrow or have a braid that they got when they were sitting on the beach, maybe in the Caribbean. And of course, braids and hair are very important to our females of color, especially because there's just a lot of history around that. It was called our crown. Um, but the girls would come back and, they would sort of, they would have it like a different color so it would be very apparent. And then they kind of would say, see, I can have your hair too, and sort of things like that. And it, that's fine. But it was just a reminder, or it was almost like felt like a code. I went away and you didn't. They not that overt about it. They were, and I say in a lot of this with cultural appropriation, it it means well. They mean well. People don't do a lot of things on purpose, but it just has that it has messages that you have no idea. In other words, it lands, the intent is fine, but the impact is really, really hard. And as we're coming to Halloween, I always would get, I'd do an assembly program on what was appropriate and what was not to go out and you know, because that's where it happens a lot. But when we talk about the hair again, when I was young, it was, oh, now I can't remember the name of the movie or the person, sorry. But we couldn't wear our hair in braids at work. A lot of times we had to have different hairstyles. And but the actress was wearing braids in the movie, a white actress, and all of a sudden it was all, she made a lot of money off of that because it really was, everybody was admiring that and things like that. So there are things that happen that are really hard. And so basically the profit thing, and some people get rewarded for cultural appropriation. And also, it does perpetuate the stereotypes. Let's talk about the native, our indigenous people and all of the things that we go through. And even we're coming up to Columbus Day, which is also Indigenous People Day, because there's a lot of sensitivity around that. And so we want to teach our students who are in school that we should be sensitive to things and why. And I know the biggest thing, and I feel so badly because I know I'm guilty of this. When as we do this work, we have to confess about ourselves. And I want it to be, and I called it an Indian princess, and want it to be Pocahontas, which is as Emmanuel said, it is false. That really wasn't her name. That was a nickname. And then as I was older and I read about how she was used and the fact that at 21 she died, she was abused. And I said, oh my gosh, I was prancing around thinking, I look really cute for that. And I didn't even realize the damage that I had done. So, I guess that's what, I need to say about that. I could go on and on, but
So basically, it is not a compliment,
right.
not a compliment. Would it be helpful? Uh, I mean, I know the backstory. Uh, when you relate your school experience, if the audience knew uh, what your clientele what your school population was like or what you were dealing with, as opposed to, you worked in several school systems. You worked in Philadelphia, you worked a little bit in Bloomfield, and and then you went into the private school. So maybe just a little conversation so they know what you were dealing with as a African or person of color in a school setting.
Yes, well, I felt right at home, of course, in Philadelphia. I worked in the inner city. And when I moved to um, Connecticut, I applied at Hartford schools because that's where I wanted to work. And then I walked in and they said, "We just got a call. They need somebody, in Bloomfield who teaches science, and they would love a female." And I was a female scientist, person who taught science. So I ended up in Bloomfield. But then when I went to the independent schools, and this was in the 70s, I went in 74. And it was totally different for me. And I mean, I had always gone to integrated schools, but never where I was the only adult of color when I was in my school. And in fact, then the second school I went into, I was also. That really wasn't true what I said because um, the the chef was black at the first school, and the lunch monitor was black in the second school. So they were my they became some of my best friends. But also it was not just racial, always just a few students, and I just took special care of them. And then you know, there was the economic pressure too. And to get the girls to feel good about themselves because most of them, not all, were there on with financial aid. However, I stayed in the independent schools, but I couldn't stay away from the city schools. So every summer, for a lot of times, I would work in the Sphere program. I worked in the Sphere program for it's for Hartford, giving the Hartford students um, an experience in the summer, and I worked for the West Middle School program. So I was in and out of both worlds throughout. So I stayed in touch. I could stay in touch and sort of know what was happening, and worked hard to get the public schools to have friendships with the independent schools, and that's something that really helped. So I think the students who had that, I could talk to them, and I would always talk to them before we went into the inner city. We went into our city schools and our partners, and a lot of friendships that happened then that still are happening with those people, with the students today. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, now it's my turn. So your topic is from chapter 7, The House Always Wins, Systemic Racism. So I know that one of your main concerns is um, homelessness, or, thinking about housing. And I know we both had experiences about that, but why don't you talk a little bit about what what
Yep.
part of that can you share?
Okay. In chapter 7, there is a lot of conversation about housing, uh, and some reference to life after slavery, which reminded me, uh, if anybody has ever seen the series Roots, um, but after Roots, there was a like a Roots epilogue of what had occurred in this country after the Civil War. And after the Civil War, when the slaves became free, they became free men and women. Uh, it was advertised they were going to get 40 acres and a mule and be able to take care of their own selves. Well, and then along comes sharecroppers. And they came down from the north with a lot of money because it's all well and good to have 40 acres and a mule, but if you don't have money to buy seed and grain or the horses or enough mules to plant the crops or to till the crops, then you've got to depend on somebody else. You got to go to and get some money. And I remember that story very clearly because that's how that's how people got in debt and they became beholding. And granted, they were freed people, but they were answerable to a major, huge debt. But housing has always been an issue in this country for people of color. It was referenced in several spots in the book. But I remember clearly the talk about the Fair Housing Act, which was passed in 1968. And 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 I remember it so clearly because I can take it back 10 years. 1958. And I told you I grew up in Hartford. And but 1958, my parents were looking to buy another house. We were all were living in Hartford. We were living in an apartment house, and so my parents went looking, and they went looking, and they went looking, but they had a lot of difficulty finding uh, housing, and specifically, uh, they came into Bloomfield. And there's one tract of land that was being built into homes. It's called Laurel Park today. If anybody knows about Laurel Park, well, the contractor, and at the time, my mother was a school teacher. My father was a school teacher, retired police officer. Uh, you know, good, hardworking people, and with two children. And they went and they spoke to the contractor. And the contractor said, wow, he says, I like you, Mr. Harris, but if I sold a house to you, I wouldn't be able to sell the rest of my houses. I got away with that then. That was 1958. Uh, could we have taken him to court? Yeah, maybe. But that was 10 years prior to the passing of the Fair Housing Act. But that didn't deter him. They kept looking. They kept looking. Finally, one day, they're driving in North Bloomfield, uh, and they come across a lot, and it's so they call the woman, call the owner, and it was a lady, and she met my father out at the site of the lot, which was prior to wetlands, and you know, 'cause, you couldn't have built your house on that property these days because it was so low. But anyway, um, she said, "Mr. Harris, I like you, but I have 3 lots here for sale. Now, if you can get 2 of your friends to buy the other 2 lots, I'll sell you all 3." And so my father had to, in turn, go around and find friends of his uh, that were willing to buy the 2 lots. And that's how we came to Bloomfield. And uh, we had to build our house because, again, it was too difficult for anybody to sell the house to us. So we had to build it. And build it he did. On wetlands, it was, they had to, at that time, bring in over 300 loads of fill just to raise it up to street level so that they could in turn build the house. Well, that's where I lived until I went off to college and got married after that. But the sad thing on that, because again, the Fair Housing Act was finally passed in 1968, but the Civil Rights Act was passed in 64. And voted, the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965. So you think to yourself, and he does a nice reference in the book, 1968, before they passed the Civil Rights, the Fair Housing Act. Are things good now? No. It still is difficult. You look at housing uh, in the greater Hartford area. And the further out you go from the city of Hartford, uh, one, the more expensive the houses are, and two, uh, you got very low percentage of people of color out there. I when I retired from public school education in 2006, and I took a real estate class and became a real estate agent for about 10 years. And so I saw firsthand things that people would do uh, almost in violation of the Fair Housing Act, just to make sure people don't move into their area. So, it's uncomfortable conversations with a black man. They're referenced a few times in his book, chapter 7, but it's still a major issue. So uh, it's something that I will, as a black man, I'll never forget.
Mhm. Can I just say that if you want to learn more about how the housing can affect our children, I wrote an article for CABE. So check out there. I forget what, well, okay, I did. So it's been on my mind. We've never talked about it, but it's so funny that you picked that because I that has really become one of my passions to look at our housing situation and just thinking about children today who are unhoused, you know, it it just really hurts. So,
Yeah,
okay, so
it's in that the homelessness, it's a whole nother issue.
mhm.
We could do a whole nother webinar on that, but I'm going to move on to the next topic, which comes for you, Martha, from chapter 14. Chapter 14. Your presence is requested. How to be an ally. Um, Martha, you have so much support from so many people. How did you manage to have so many allies?
I'm blessed and lucky. You know, and it is true. And I think uh, because I think this work is passionate and I try to live by what I teach and what's happening to other people in a sense of how do I get to do all I have to do. And I just think I project this, person who looks like she needs help, but also I treat people the way we need to treat people, and so they come to me. So, thinking about being an ally, I I know a lot of people want to be allies, and sometimes they come and say, "I want to help, but I don't know what to do. I'm afraid." I understand that I need to be doing something, but I'm not going to do anything, if I have to do it alone. And then we think about, as Acho said, that thinking about the white abolitionists like William Lord Garrison, this really started. Uh, Being an ally isn't something new. And as we look through history, we can see there were white allies and it was a big risk, and many of them, were hurt or lost their jobs, lost their family, and things like that. So it's not something that you just can wake up and then say, oh, today I'm going to go out and be an ally. But it's something that it's internal. It has to happen to you. So I'm just was thinking about it, and I'm just gonna think about my view of how I did have so many allies who helped me do some great works. So um, I think when the people I was always drawn to were people who were bold enough to come up to me. They didn't know me. I don't know if, they had had other friends of color, but they were friendly. They, it was the people who were genuinely friendly, and they reached out and they included me. Like my first years there, I never had to sit alone for lunch. I think the people who reached out to help me feel comfortable and a sense of belonging were the people who eventually became my allies. Um, they would sit next to me at meetings. They would have discussions with me. If I said something, they would say, "I think that was interesting what Martha said," and they'll acknowledge my voice. And then gradually we would become friends. We meet for coffee or go out to lunch together. And I think another thing that was really important that that I felt and how I gained allies, I think, was they would check on me, especially if something tragic happened in the news to a Black woman or anything, a riot, or they would say, how are you doing? Can you want to talk? Can we? So that was good. But also they supported my work. Excuse me. I wanted to start a diversity committee at one of my schools. And sorry, I know you were looking for. And they said, I want to join the committee. I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to join because I want to learn. And so they always supported me if I was I'll never forget the time I was giving a book talk in Avon, and it was during the summer, and someone read about it and called the other people I've worked with, and I had like a whole section in the audience of people that came out to support me and also hear what I had to say. So eventually, we started a student group, but I started that. I was the only person of color, adult of color, but other people said, I want to come work with you. We made it a club and said, I'm going to make my schedule available so we could do that. And it just flourished. And so it's just thinking about being an ally. The interesting thing about it was that they were people from the empowered groups at my school. So they could help, but also when I was being challenged by parents who didn't like you know, maybe what we were teaching or something like that, that they were willing to stand next to me and really support me. And they were willing to take the criticism too. And they were willing to be able to talk to people and say, this is important work we're doing. So I think just actually, I think some of them worked harder than I did, I must admit, because they just wouldn't stop once you just get that feeling. So if you're going to be an ally, just be friendly, read up on things and work on yourself first, but support things around you. And so I thought once I left my school, once I retired, that would sort of be the end of it. And then CABE showed up. And I just have to do a shout out for giving me the opportunity and standing by me and pushing me. So you never know what you offer, or you don't think it's much, but it ends up being very big. So
Yes, it was. Yes, indeed. Okay, moving on.
okay. Thug life, justice for some. This is interesting. I really want to hear what you have to say. So I know that it hurts you when you see young males who you've mentored, you've taught, you've coached, and thinking about what can happen to them and how you feel about that.
Let me begin. This is Thug Life is actually in chapter 10 of his book. But chapter 10 begins with a quote from a nationally known criminologist at the time, John DiLulio, 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 who in 1995 stated, "They kill or maim on impulse without any intelligible motive. The buzz of impulsive violence, the vacant stares and smiles, and remorseless eyes. They quite literally have no concept of the future. They place zero value on the lives of their victims, whom they reflect reflexively dehumanized, capable of committing the most heinous acts of physical violence for the most trivial reasons. For as long as their youthful energies hold out, they will do what comes naturally: murder, rape, rob, assault, burglarize, deal deadly drugs, and get high. Well, he didn't mention people of color, but that's who DeLulio was talking about. And he was he brought this. He was invited to the White House by Bill Clinton, and this, in turn, is being credited with leading to the crime bill, Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act. Um, Now, it said, well, what's wrong with dealing with violent crime? Well, nothing, as long as you are dealing with everybody on a equal basis. But that's not what DeLulio intended. He intended it to be directed towards people of color. Uh, this in turn led to the three strikes. Uh, Three strikes and you're in prison for life. It led to mandatory life sentence for repeat offenders, provided funding for hiring of 100,000 new police officers, and also provided a whopping $9.7 billion for new prisons. Um, Gang mentality was not invented by Black folks. Uh, when I first started teaching in the late 60s and into the 70s, the Crips, the Bloods, the Latin Kings were all very well-known gangs. But that's not the invention of gangs. Gangs had its invention back in the 1800s when there were Irish American gangs. And what about during the days of Prohibition, where there were gangs of people of other other communities? So, it's nothing that we started, but we received the blame. This incarceration has been an issue forever and always, and he brings it out quite clearly in the book. Uh, for example, incarcerated Black males, one out of every three. Now, these are figures from about 5 years ago. One out of every three Black males will end up going to jail or to prison. One out of six Latinos, and one out of 17 white men. Now, for women, it's a little different. For women, Black women or women of color, one out of 18 will end up in jail or in prison. However, for white women, one out of 111. That's a figure that just smacks me in the face. And I said, why? How? Uh, we are no more thugs than the person next to us. So again, this goes back to what some of our politicians are trying to take out of the memory banks, out of the books, is that area of diversity, equity, fairness, Uh, it's very difficult as a teacher, and I'm still teaching. I'm gonna always be teaching. I'll be teaching up until my dying day. Uh, but I'm proud of the fact that I think I have done more good than bad. I've got more success stories out there that if I didn't have a finger in it, I don't think it would have happened. And so I'm proud of the work that we have done. I'm proud of the students that I have taught, and I get that it comes back to me almost on a daily basis. I run into somebody that says, "Thank you for what you did. Thank you for holding my feet to the fire. Thank you for not letting me get away with uh, doing something that I shouldn't have been doing." So again, I could go on, but I know we're running short on time, so I'm gonna I'm gonna move on. Martha, you had the topic, the mythical me, the angry black men. Uh, why did you choose this topic?
I did because I always ask you because if you have a scowl, are you angry? Or what's going on? And I used to notice when I taught that my when I would see my young men of color, so often they had these faces, these angry looking faces. And I just, they weren't, I didn't, they weren't that way. They weren't always angry. And I was trying to get a hold on why. And then thinking about history or thinking about things they experienced during the day that we are not even aware of. But we all know about so many people. If you see three men of color, boys of color together on the street, you grab your pocketbook. Some people cross the street. I read a book called Whistling Vivaldi, and it's about, a young black male who would have to walk, um, in white neighborhoods. And people, he just noticed everybody was like afraid of him, even if he had on a suit or whatever. So he started to whistle Vivaldi because it was something to show I'm not going to hurt you. I like good music that you can relate to. You know, don't be afraid of me. But I would have, when I would call my black students in and when we would talk, especially my advisees, they would tell me how really hard it was to walk around the school, and people saying things to them and trying to learn how not to say things back because they knew they'd be in trouble. So they kind of would just put on their face so people would kind of leave them alone. And once I knew how they were feeling, I could be their advocates when I was sitting in a meeting where they were talking about one of them. And I don't know, he seems so like he doesn't like this, but and I say that's not it. I could talk about it. But then also, let's look, I mean, I think that Acho said, yeah, a lot of times he is angry, because it's hard walking through a day. And it wasn't until after I retired that I started to go back into the schools and I would shadow some of the black students. I was angry by the end of the day. There were things that happened so many times that teachers didn't even notice. And and there was one particular young man, and I was just trying to work with the family because he had such potential. He was such a nice kid, but he wasn't showing it. And I saw him come in the morning, excited to be in school, exciting to learn. As I followed him through the day, I just saw him just spiraling downhill, downhill. It was one after another, and I could see what was happening. So, that this I just wanted to read about this and say, what can I do? How can I be more of an advocate, even as a retired person who isn't in the school? So that's still a challenge for me. So let's move on to your next one. Um, Love wins. This is a nice one, the interracial family. And I'm curious because neither of us is in a interracial family, how this is a topic that was speaking to you some kind of way.
Yeah, I found this, well, conversation was chapter 12. Yeah, chapter 12, The Love Wins, the interracial family. Again, I entered Bloomfield High School as a student in 1959. Um, I was a basketball player and and a pretty good one. Okay, so I there were a lot of people were drawn to me, and uh, and I started talking to a cheerleader. Now, at Bloomfield High in 1959, the school was probably about 85% white and about 15% people of color. And as opposed to what it is now, it's almost the complete opposite. So I talk to anybody, everybody. It doesn't bother me, and I'm having a conversation with the cheerleader, and I'm getting stares, and I'm getting people looking at me, and uh, and then I get a call from her that says, uh, "My father says I can't talk to you anymore." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because at the time, because you're a Negro," and that kind of hit. And it was okay. Yeah, I am. And so I went through that myself. Uh, I knew I heard very loud and clear about the miscegenation law, uh, which was passed. It's a Pace versus Alabama in 1883 that prohibited uh, people of color and white persons getting married. I didn't think much of it. Uh, I wasn't planning on marrying anybody white, but I'm living in Connecticut. I have a cousin my same age who's living in Virginia, and he went to school in Virginia. And he met a woman who happened to be white. Now, this was in the early 60s, and they fell in love and they wanted to get married. Uh, he, they had to move somewhere across the Mason-Dixon line uh, so they would be able to get married. And so, a matter of fact, I think they moved to Pennsylvania somewhere and got married. And he passed away about a year ago, but he was married to Barbara for 50 some years. So it was a beautiful marriage. But he ended up back in Virginia because the law was repealed in 1967. So he didn't have to stay away that long because I believe they got married in 64. So he only had to stay away for 3 years. But it's just, and again, this was again after Black folks had received the Civil Rights and the Voting Rights Act, uh, that this was passed. So it's our country has been through some stuff, has been through some stuff, and but it was I saw it and I said, "Ooh, I need to just tell that story." So you know that what I went through up here, which was trivial to what he went through in Virginia, and that was people in my family. Just but what the thousands and thousands of other folks had to go through, uh, because interracial couples weren't allowed. And are they allowed today? Yeah, but you still will get a stare. You will still get somebody looking at you uh, because you're not supposed to do that. Now, if it's uh, if it's a black man and a white woman, you're not supposed to do that. They will allow a white man and a black woman much easier than they would allow it the other way around. And that's just a fact. It's a fact. So
Hmm.
I'm gonna let it go right there.
So now we'll have questions.
Okay, thank you, Martha and Don. I do have two questions here.
Okay.
The first one is for you, Martha.
Mhm.
So they say, first, thank you so much for speaking on this important matter. Your dedication to helping students of color is inspiring. My question, have you considered the possibility that the Bloomfield colorless children needed your expertise in appreciating their brothers and sisters of color more than your favorite kids in Bloomfield and inner city Hartford needed special attention? Please know I ask this difficult question intending the utmost respect and from a place of love.
Yes, and I thank you for that question because I was always, my job was mainly as teacher and or administrator. And right within that realm, I helped all students. In fact, the club that we had more um, white students than students of color, and so I've always tried to be aware of it and was glad that I had allies. So I would have them observe me, come in my class a lot and observe me to make sure that I was taking care of all the children. But you never know how you impact people. But I went back. We started a Martin Luther King celebration. Our club used to do that. And I was invited to come back every year after I retired. And so I had a group of about five young white females come up to me when we came back. And they said, "We want to just get you alone because we want to talk to you." And I said, "Okay." And they said, "We just want you to know how much of an impact you made on our lives. And I said, really? Tell me more. So they started to tell me things I had even forgotten. One said, you saw me crying and you came and you asked me, and I told you what was going on, and we ended up going to my advisor together, and sort of things like that. So I've always been aware of it, but never, you don't always get feedback. But I thank you for the question. And it's I was very deliberate about doing that and about trying my best to make sure I was taking care of all of the children.
Thank you, Martha. Don, this question is for you. So they say, thank you very much for this opportunity. Their question reads, how would you compare and contrast this book and Mr. Acho's writing with those of someone like Thomas Sowell?
Thomas who?
Sowell?
Can you help me out, Martha?
No, go ahead. Just ask, see if you can ask what.
Well, yeah. Can you give me some more? Uh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure who the author is, who
Mhm.
the other author is.
Okay, let's see. Let's see if the person that wrote the question can give some examples of some books or writings of Thomas Sowell. Let's see.
Well, they can still send questions
Mhm.
to you after this, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I'll be glad to answer. I just it doesn't strike me. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay, I have a comment here earlier in the conversation. It says this is painfully hitting home, but reflective of the journey and determined to continue the fight for public education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a quote that I'd like to leave with you. Uh, are we wrapping up now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh
we
yeah.
can.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank all of you. You kind of Martha kind of pushed me into this, and I'm glad I did that. Hopefully, what I said has meant something to our listening audience. Uh, but a quote that I have found, and I don't even know where I found it. I think I found it in the book, but racism is not a finish line that we will cross, but it is a road that we will travel. Unquote. But again, I want to thank everyone. I do appreciate it, and you may even be able to get me to come back and do it again, Lisa, if if I pass the
Wonderful.
muster.
Wonderful. Don and Martha, just thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your reactions to the book and for tackling some tough topics. We really appreciate your honesty and your willingness to have this conversation with us. So thank you both very much. And I would like to thank you not just for myself, but from the CABE DEIB committee, the CABE Board of Directors, and certainly all of us on the staff. We appreciate and welcome these conversations. Um, I want to share some upcoming programs, but I almost kind of don't want to. I just kind of want to let this sit because it's been such a powerful conversation. And I think I'm going to follow my gut on this one and just say, Don and Martha, it is a pleasure to do this work with you. It is a pleasure to work with you, period, and just to learn from you. So
Mhm.
thank you very, very much for being with us today. All of you who joined us today, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to be a part of this conversation. And we all wish you all well and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.